There was a long period of time in the 20th century, in the mid-20th century, from about the 1930s to about the mid-1960s, when in the West people thought government could solve problems. They were very respectful and applauded in the United States the efforts of the government in the 1930s under Franklin Roosevelt, and then again in the war. And many countries looked to government after the war as being enormously important instruments for social progress. But we sort of lost that faith toward the end of the 20th century, and now I think there's a widespread pessimism about what governments can actually do. There's a real sense that national governments are too big to do the small things and too small to do the big things. From my point of view, yes, I would like the government to do the work better, but I think it's just as important right now that we look to government to unleash human creativity within its populations, that a lot of the solutions are going to come from within and from bottom up, not top down. That's the nature of the new age. Let me give you 3 quick examples of what I mean. Within the United States today, a third of our workforce are now freelancers, distributed employment. And that is, they don't work for companies, they basically work for themselves. And that number is going up rapidly. By 2020, it's expected to be 40%. That's a substantial proportion of our workforce. And they're being held back by government regulation. There's a lot of confusion in the United States, for example, about whether someone who is working on his own as a contractor for a company is an independent contractor for tax purposes or is an employee of the company. There are big disagreements about that. There are all sorts of registration issues that go into that. There are blocks that go into that. There are a lot of people out there who will figure out how to create their own jobs if we give them the opportunity and unleash them in a way that they can sort of look after themselves. And we shouldn't discount that as part of the solution. Let me give you another example here in Europe. It's estimated now that 1 out of every 4 new organizations in Europe is what's called a hybrid organization or a hybrid corporation. And that is an organization that is doing social good, but has also found a way to create a market or to create a stream of income to support that organization. So it's doing 2 things at once. It's neither a nonprofit trying to solve social problems, nor is it a pure for-profit, has no real interest, single bottom line kind of organization. It's a hybrid that is, I think, the wave of the future. Very important that we have other organizations other than government that address social issues, that create a civil society in effect. And yet the tax laws and the other kind of regulations that apply to these hybrids can often be restraining and can hold them back. The third example, I just came from a group we have a group of Middle Eastern women who are now visiting the United States under the auspices of the State Department, the Goldman Sachs Foundation, and we're working with them at the Kennedy School at Harvard. And they're women entrepreneurs in the Middle East. And what you find in so many developing countries, let's take the Middle East as an example, more than half the college graduates are women, but only 21% of the people in the workforce are women. There are all sorts of people who are being held back by restrictions, but there are some women who are willing to step forward now and are forming their own businesses, small businesses, and they're creating lots of jobs. And it's a bright spot in the Middle East, and a place which is so roiled by trouble. We have these women stepping forward, and it's been estimated by the World Bank that if women had the same participation rate in Egypt as the men, the economy would be it would grow by a third. Growth will create jobs, and we need to unleash the power of those women and understand that there have been people who've been marginalized not because by their societies. In many, many countries, there are restraints on what women can do. We need to unlock that. Technology allows these women to start working out of their homes. They can set up small businesses out of their homes. That they're sort of forbidden by society to be out and about. But in Saudi Arabia, you can actually run something out of your home. Those are the kinds of things I think that are smaller, that are more micro, but yet at the same time unleash human creativity. And we don't always look to government and then wait and complain and so forth. Let's get going on some of the solutions that are at hand.